All In Sports Network. We love sports.
Not the start we all envisioned, we all hoped for Mike Elko and the Aggies, but still a long way to go. Welcome into All In Aggies. Ben Peck here. Listen, just full transparency, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today, and really throughout the tail end of this week, I've worked probably 14 hours yesterday between college game day and then the game. Normally, I'll have highlights and put together more sound clips from these players, but I'm going to try to speed through this weekend, but did want to offer some thoughts on obviously a big game, big moment for Texas A&M and Mike Elko, their first game of the 2024 season, a 23-13 loss to Texas A&M. Now, let's just, I guess, get the top line review out of the way. In some ways, this felt discouraging and upsetting and disappointing and frustrating, especially offensively. On the other hand, really, when you watch the game back and if you rethink it, Texas A&M was in that football game all the way, till last couple minutes of the fourth quarter when Notre Dame took that field goal to make a 10-point lead. So this was not, I think it felt more out of reach because of how good Notre Dame's defense was playing, but not necessarily because Texas A&M was just hapless out there as a whole. Offensively, maybe a different story, but I think it's important to remember, and I'm not trying to serve the maroon Kool-Aid here, but Notre Dame is a really good team, okay? And they might have the best secondary in the nation. They certainly might have the best secondary Texas A&M faces this year, and so you have to give credit to them. I want to say it this way, and I want to challenge Aggie fans to be honest with themselves about this. Going into the Notre Dame game, if I told you Texas A&M is going to lose this game, do you still believe in Mike Elko in that scenario? I think a lot of people say yes. Now, I'm not here to tell you you should or you shouldn't or what to do, what to think. That's your prerogative. But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, a 10-point loss to a really good team, which really, the last field goal was kind of because you had to go for it on fourth down that set them up. So really almost like a one-possession loss in a sense to a really good team at home. Not ideal, not what you want. And I know you would say, I believe in Mike Elko, but in the back of my mind, it's a hypothetical that I don't think is going to happen because I think we're going to win this game against Notre Dame. I did too. I thought Texas A&M was going to win. Even tied at the half, third quarter, I thought they were going to find a way. Would they go down and drive, tie the game up? I'm thinking, okay, here we go. The defense has been playing great. Just get that one stop. But then Notre Dame, pushes it down the field. So my point is, the coaching situation, you hire coaches and you evaluate coaches based off how they respond, how they adapt. Jimbo Fisher's not the Texas A&M head coach anymore, not because of necessarily where the baseline results of his team were, but because he and his staff had hit a point where they were failing to adapt and address inadequacies going back years and years. And if you believe in Mike Elko, Colin Klein, Jay Bateman, and that staff, what's going to tell you how good they are as a coaching staff is how they respond to this and how they learn, how they adjust. And I literally don't think you can tell after one game. That's something that takes multiple games in a row. Again, not here to say you can't have an opinion that's not going to work out. But I think for people who are frustrated, I understand it. Disappointed, I understand it. But let's keep things in perspective here. It is one game out of 12 against a really good Notre Dame team. All right, second thing I want to touch on is, like, as much as we like the big, flashy, sexy start to the season and rise up the polls, get the buzz, not to be the bearer of not bad news, but not to bring up ghosts from, Jimbo Fisher, Kevin Sumlin's past, but like, how many times have we seen Texas A&M off to that flashy 3-0, 4-0 start, top 15, top 10 ranking, and then just crash and burn to the point where they might not have even made a 12-team playoff in those days, even with the great start, 2013, the Kenny Hill days, the year Trevor Knight played. Like, as much as it's nice to start the year with a big flashy win, if you told me after the fact, hey, you're going to lose one early, but you're going to, still come through down the stretch, win 9-10 games, 11 still on the table. That's probably unlikely, but then I think you take it. That's my point. So keep it in perspective. Notre Dame, a really tough team, terrible loss, like just viscerally, internally. I get it. Like so much buildup and so much, like kind of the storybook season, I guess, is out the window in that regard, unless they literally run the table from here on out. But practically, a lot of things still ahead of this team. But let's break down what actually kind of went wrong and just thematically some of the things that haunted Texas A&M in this game, and maybe some of the things that were not as alarming as they might feel right now. Number one, I guess just defensively overall. Defensively, it was a weird game because objectively, when you look at the numbers, Texas A&M did not fare too badly overall. Held Notre Dame to 158 yards passing, just about 200 yards rushing, although, toward the end, that last touchdown, Mike Elko touched on this. They were selling out to stop the run, and they basically burst through and picked up a 20-something yard touchdown when it was going to be that or like a no gain. But my point, 356 yards overall, didn't force any turnovers. And sorry, I'm trying to look up the sacks just to make sure they had one sack. So I get it. And the frustrating thing, and we'll toss to a soundbite from Mike Elko about this, I think for the defense, which was weird, was that they never had, there were several times, the sequence where they played Mo Bamba, I guess it worked out. But there were several times where it felt like third down, obvious passing situation, and the team was going to, the crowd was really hyped for like that big play, that big sack, that big turnover, and it never came. It never happened. Even though they were getting stops on third down, they were 2 for 12 on third down. But Notre Dame, and it kind of felt this way for Texas A&M offensively, even though they weren't converting on third down very well, they weren't just totally, like I said, hapless offensively. Like they were avoiding disaster and they were sustaining drives. There weren't like constant 3 and outs. Same thing could be said for Texas A&M offensively. Like weren't getting touchdowns, but they were moving the ball to some degree to the point where, especially considering how your defense is playing, you're still in this game. So that was the weird thing. But going back to what Coach Elko talked about, he discussed how there were plays where Texas A&M should have been, it was weird, almost like the harder the situation was for Notre Dame as the game wore on, the better Notre Dame fared in terms of converting those situations. Obviously, the notorious one was they get them backed up first and 25 after the 15-yard offensive pass interference penalty. I think 2 plays later, they go down, they score that big rushing touchdown. So like you're telling me you can come through all these times on third down, you get the 4th down stop, but first and 25, you can't get off the field. So that was a weird thing where it just felt like Notre Dame, even though Texas A&M was getting the third down stops and they were, but they were allowing Notre Dame to get some yards to where they were eventually able to find some sort of a rhythm and just flip it on its head. But here's Mike Elko kind of touching on that after the game.
We were really, really bad off schedule tonight on defense. 2nd and 8 to 2nd and 10. I think when we go back and watch the film, I think is going to be one of the worst down and distances of the night. And I think we got to look at what we're doing. We got to look at how we're challenging throws. I think we got really soft in our coverage in those down and distance. Almost like, we kind of got on our heels a little bit because we won first down, and that's the exact opposite of what you should do. Again, we were aware of it. We were trying to get it fixed and corrected. We just couldn't get it done. And so, ultimately at the end of the day, we had them 3rd and 5 backed up and had a chance to make a play to get off the field and didn't do it. And I think at the end of the day, that's the turning point in the game. We've got them 3rd and 5 on the 20-yard line. And we don't get them off the field. And I think if we get them off the field there, they're punting to us, and we've got the ball with a chance to go down and win it. We don't make that play, and then all of a sudden they get some runs going, they get some rhythm. That kid makes a great catch on their sideline, and next thing you know, they're lining up in field goal range, and so they hit the run.
So there you had it. Like we win first down, and somehow we play worse, and we're on our heels, giving up too much cushion I think that said it pretty well. I didn't really ask my question in that regard in the best way, but Coach, I think, understood where I was getting at. It didn't feel like there was defensive momentum throughout the game, even while they were keeping them at bay, which was just kind of a weird dynamic that played out. It felt like that stadium was just asking to just blow the roof off. And Notre Dame, to their credit, never allowed, never had a catastrophic play or a situation where they really hurt themselves, self-inflicted. I think important too to notice several situations that could have easily flipped how this game turned out. Some plays that come to mind just off the top of my head. There were two situations with what looked to be an offsides for Notre Dame. I think one time was on a 4th down, and Connor Wigman throws it up. It's incomplete. They didn't call the offsides. There was one what looked to be offsides that got called for a false start, which I think can't remember if that was a 4th down, but it was like 4th and 5, 3rd and 5. I think it was 4th and 5 and would have given them 1st down. Instead, you back them up. There was a play toward the end of the game, second half. Will Lee had what would have been, it was 3rd quarter, I guess it would have been. Will Lee jumped the route, broke up the pass, almost basically had a pick 6, which totally would have flipped the feel of the game on its head. And that's not to denigrate Will Lee. That's just to say that's how fine the margins are, to where one little play here, one little extra thing there, and we're talking about a whole different narrative, team. Maybe we're like, oh yeah, the offense, got to work on it, but they found a way. But this is how fine the margins are. And then on the first scoring drive for Texas A&M, I believe the first drive of the game, they had the 3rd and 5 kind of swing pass out to the running back, Emmitt Smith Jr., EJ Smith, and just out of reach, just misplaced from Connor Wigman. You have to kick the field goal, settle for 3 there. I think if it's a good throw, they pick up the 1st down. Who knows if that turns into a touchdown, how that helps the rest of the game play out. So just another thing that crossed my mind of how many near misses there were for Texas A&M, how easily some things, both in and out of their control, could have swayed this game and changed kind of maybe how we feel about it today. Again, taping this just about 24 hours after kickoff from the Notre Dame opener. Let's see what some other stuff we could talk. Oh, another thing I want you to keep in mind, and this is maybe where it tilts the tide for me. Keep in mind that like Texas A&M and other teams is not the only team around the country that might be allowed to just struggle a little bit in week 1. And especially if you consider their opponents, there are a lot of teams that fared worse. There are a lot of teams that won their games that I think should inspire a lot less confidence than even this Texas A&M team did in a loss. Now, again, I'm not here to like carry water for Texas A&M. Listen, I'll say this. I'm not an Aggie. I did not attend Texas A&M, but I say that to say I hope that can help me have a more level head in terms of like it helps take some of the emotion out of it for me, to where I think I can deliver hard truths when needed, but also like I think A&M fans can be really down on yourselves if things go wrong. And I get it. Listen, I'm a Cubs fan. I felt that way for years. Like I know the feeling, but there is light at the end of the tunnel with some of this stuff, and some of the things that you're upset and frustrated about, while warranted, like important to keep it in perspective. So yeah, just going back to other teams across the country. I mean, if Texas A&M would have put out a performance like they did today, Saturday, like Florida did against Miami, I think we'd be having a way different discussion. If it looked like Clemson against Georgia, or Notre Dame comes in here and wins, 34-10, running away with it, I think then you have a lot more eyebrows raised, questions of like, man, we thought these teams were sort of on the level, and they're not even close. And then I think you're talking about maybe 9 wins at best. I think this team, like, look, Notre Dame could go undefeated. Notre Dame could be one of the best defense secondaries in the country. Texas A&M, now listen, I know Texas A&M is passing for 100 yards a game. Even if that's on the low end, how consistently is that high end going to get if this is the low end, even in a difficult situation? So I get it. It's not like there's just reasons for optimism are abound, but just keep in mind, Texas A&M, disappointing, but within the realm of teams that disappointed week one, I don't even think they're close to the top of the list. Don't even think this is close to one of the most upsetting losses in Texas A&M history, since they've joined the SEC. Think Fresno State gave Michigan a pretty good game for a while. Oregon, made it cute against Idaho. Okay, I'd feel a lot better about, or let me put it this way. I know those teams won, but I'd be a lot more concerned if I was maybe one of those teams than I would if I was Texas A&M. Not to say Texas A&M is going to be better than Michigan or Oregon, but you understand what I'm saying based on that week one performance. And then I think the one thing we do have to talk about, two of the most glaring things that we thought we were going to see, but we didn't. Let's start talk about that passing game that we touched on. Not good enough. And really, I think the concern, I know there's a lot of talk about Connor Wigman, and he certainly did not play nearly as well as they need him to. But the receivers, I think that question mark is very valid after this. We're going to hear from Coach Elko here talking about basically why they weren't able to get anything going. Actually, let's just go ahead and listen to that now. This is Mike Elko talking about the passing game.
Yeah, I just think we gotta go back to the tape, and we got to figure out how to put him in better situations to get him comfortable. The challenge tonight was they were going to play us in man all night. And, so there's not a lot of easy access throws to get him comfortable and get him in rhythm. People are going to have to win to do that. And we weren't able to get it going. And it seemed like whether it was him missing, he had a chance to hit no on the big over route and kind of overshot him by a little bit and got the pick, or guys not getting the separation that we needed to get. It just, one way or another, we just weren't able to get it done. We tried to do some different things to create some rubs and picks, and that didn't get it going. And it was really, really hard because he was not in rhythm, and there was nothing easy to get. And so we kept trying, we just couldn't get there.
That last play, and that was an example of what it looked like when things were going well. As Coach said, they were playing man. They were relying on Notre Dame was basically banking on the A&M wide receivers man-to-man are not going to be able to beat any of our guys. And consistently, they were right. That is, I think, the big alarm bells. Is that because you're playing Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, and that Notre Dame secondary, or is that because this wide receiver group has a lot of work to do? And another thing that was concerning for me, it kind of cuts two ways. On one hand, he talked about they were trying to figure out ways to get a rhythm and get things going with some rub routes and the like. I guess just build some sort of confidence or whatnot. On the other hand, I guess the downfield passing element, I'm trying to think, aside of the ball to Noah Thomas and maybe a throw here or two there, not only was Texas A&M not getting free in any separation with their wide receivers on a consistent basis, did not feel like there were big play opportunities deep down the field. Not to say you have to do that all the time or like you have to rip off a 20-yard gain every fifth play to be a good offense. I think it's good that you can put together a drive where you're methodical and you work your way down the field. All those things are great, but that was certainly a glaring question mark coming into the season. How are these receivers going to fare? That didn't clear up at all. I know there was the stuff with Connor Wigman being maybe a little sick at the game and how much that played a role if he wasn't 100%. But it did almost feel like, I told someone, it felt like you're trying to run a Kansas State offense, like literally Kansas State's offense from last year with Jimbo Fisher's offensive players. And I know that they have talent, transfer portal guys, and those guys are versatile. It's not like they can only do one thing, but it did feel like, for whatever the reason, that style of play has not transitioned over yet. I thought the offensive line held up relatively well, and now need to get more of a consistent, just like the defense. This was such a weird game. It's not like the offensive line was just pushed around, but they also weren't just pushing Notre Dame around. They weren't getting blitzed and just giving up sack after sack after sack, but they also weren't making it easy. for like just massive chunk plays here. So obviously something to monitor going forward. And then just last thing before I hop it off here that I did want to touch on. Oh, the defensive line. Listen, I know there's been a lot of talk. 1 sack was the final number. How good was the defensive line? This was supposed to be like, a 6 offensive starts for Notre Dame and one of the best defensive lines in the country. What happened? I think we forget, first of all, sacks are not the end-all be-all. And number 2, they can come in waves. And I do think you have to give credit for not only Notre Dame's game plan, but the offensive line. Their demise had been greatly exaggerated. I thought they played very well, but also, again, going to their game plan, they were calling short passes, getting the ball out of Riley Leonard's hands. It gave him opportunities when he was in trouble to get out of it however he needed to, a chance to make a play with his legs. And I wanted to read this to you because this was the sack numbers for Texas A&M last year. If you're specifically worried about that, which I know a lot of people are, and I understand, I get it. Last year, first 3 games against New Mexico and UL Monroe, and I'm forgetting Miami, their second game, 2 sacks, 2 sacks, 2 sacks. Next 3 games after that, Arkansas, Auburn, Alabama, 7, 7, 6. Okay, so I understand. Yeah, I think people forget with how good the defensive line was last year. We were literally talking about after the game against Louisiana Monroe, why aren't they getting a lot of sacks with this defensive line? And then the floodgates opened. Okay, not to say you can bank on it, but I think just keep that in mind. All things considered, I think the defense played really solid. Again, just as Coach Elko said earlier, missing out on timely conversions. And it's, 2 for 12 on third downs, but the 2 that they had, like they were converting, the ones that they did were big and very timely. And when you look at the secondary, I thought played much better. As we said, 158 yards receiving. That was probably the biggest bright spot I felt watching this game yesterday. Was we were not seeing receivers just running wild and free. And that's 158 yards with the nice catch on the sidelines by their guy. I can't remember his name, but so I think there is a lot to work on with the defense. There's a lot to work with that defense. Don't let the offensive struggles concern you too much. Don't disregard them and give them a free pass, but don't let the offensive struggles dampen your excitement for what potentially this defense could be. Because I do think, if we're being honest, we all knew Texas A&M was going to be built on good defense and control the ball, control the clock, avoid turnovers on offense. You didn't do that offensively. Defense played well with few exceptions. It's just those few times really came back to bite you. All right, so that's all we have for you here. Breaking down this Notre Dame game. Again, feeling a little under the weather, but I appreciate you guys. Go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. Tell people about the show. We are just getting it started. And again, we're going to have so many more elements to the show later on as we go. A lot more like pre-produced video packages, not just throwing a sound bite here and there, but feeling a little under this weather this weekend, trying to make it as smooth sailing as can be. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your family. Check out All In Aggies.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.